another edition of Be the Change Georgia, where we amplify the voices of the inspiring business leaders surrounding the B Corp and social impact movements across the Southeast to help you learn how to build your legacy at the intersection of people, planet, purpose, and profit. Today, there are more than 8,000 B Corps in over 80 countries and 180 different industries, unified by one common goal: transforming the global economy to benefit all people, communities, and the planet. If you want to learn how to plug into our purpose-driven business community alongside the inspiring leaders we feature on this show, check us out at belocalgeorgia.com or on Instagram or Facebook at belocalgeorgia, and we'll hope to meet you at our next event. Today you'll have the opportunity to learn from Claire Angelle, founder and CEO of Elevia. Elevia is a strategic PR agency that helps mission-driven business leaders elevate their voices and find the human heart in their global impact stories. Claire is a former diplomat with the French Foreign Service who previously opened and led the City of Atlanta's first Office of International Affairs, where she helped generate over $2.7 billion in economic impact. With over 20 years of experience in international business and media relations, she now guides social entrepreneurs and nonprofits in navigating the complexities of ethical communications and strategic growth. In our conversation, Claire shares her journey from government stability to becoming an accidental entrepreneur, and why effective impact storytelling requires a careful balance of both the head and the heart. Stay tuned to learn how to move your mission-driven narrative beyond dry data and into the human connections that drive real action. Enjoy the episode. Today's episode of Be the Change Georgia is brought to you by Rataza. Rataza is a B Corp and social enterprise striving to make local food more accessible and affordable while directly supporting our community's farmers, reconnecting consumers to their food, and feeding families struggling with food insecurity. Learn more at rataza.com. Claire Angelle, welcome to Be the Change Georgia. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to have you. I've enjoyed our getting to know each other and building our relationship, and we've known each other for, I'm trying to even think now, like 4 years, 5
a few
years now.
years. I think, maybe 2019, something like that.
Yeah. Oh God, that's a seven
Yes.
years. What year is it? I love how everything from like 2018, 20, it's like 3 or 4 years ago. You're like, no,
That's
it
right.
wasn't. So, but yeah, excited to have you on and super excited to unpack your story, talk a little bit about your work, and well, I guess I'll just go ahead and kind of embarrass you off the rip because like I'm one of the best stories ever of like a lot of the people we have some sort of cool, like I got started in entrepreneurship story, but like you, I'm picturing a small French girl in the countryside selling magazines door to door, and I'm just going to leave it there and let you tell the rest of the story.
I mean, magazine is a loose term, okay? So my entrepreneurial debut was, I must have been, 12 years old. And I was very big into bird watching. So if anyone ever wonder, if I was really the cool kid back then, I think you got your answer right then. And so I started a magazine that was really a compilation of my favorite bird articles, that was handwritten, and it was folded in like a beautiful turquoise folder, and it was named La Hulotte, which is a small species of owl. And because it was handwritten, I would only make 3 copies that I would sell for 5 francs each.
Limited edition.
Limited. I mean, I don't even have a copy. Like maybe my mother can find one in the archives. But that was the beginning of not only my entrepreneurial journey, but also my storytelling journey. So yes, a very humble beginning in Northwest France.
Well, it's funny that I say I'll embarrass you and then I'll embarrass myself so that it's fair. But when I was little, I want to say my neighbor and I were trying, I don't know, we were probably trying to buy like baseball cards, but we would mix our own bug spray. And it was like, it's probably the same thing you made to like make fake throw up. It was like toothpaste and like Windex, and we'd mix it up and we'd basically knock door to door and offer to kill your ant piles. I don't think we killed anything. They might have smelled minty fresh, but for like a quarter, we would do your extermination work.
Hey,
So
you know that you have to work that hustle muscle early on, right?
I think your creativity was a little bit better. But yeah, no, I always love hearing those stories, and like even your like as we jump from the funny and the early stage embarrassing stories, like you're like actually launching your own agency though, like was kind of born out of like an oh shit moment. So
Right.
why don't you go ahead and fill
Right.
everybody in
No,
on that part as well?
it was not a well thought out plan. And for those, so I started my career with the French Foreign Service. So very stable job working in government. That's what brought me to Atlanta with the French Consulate General here. I was press and communication officer. And then I was invited by the mayor of Atlanta at the time to open and lead the Office of International Affairs. So another government work, and led the office for 5 years. And after 10 plus years in government, I was like, well, let me see if the grass is greener on the corporate side. So I got a media job in New York. My husband quit his job. My son at the time, I think, was 15 months old. I remember I started a new job January 2nd, 2018, and by February 15th, the CEO stepped down and we all get layoff. And I'm like, yes, oh shit, part of
Oh
my
shit, it's proper.
it was really like I've had always taken what I thought was a very secure way. Despite my very early entrepreneurial debut, I had no intention of being a real entrepreneur, and I was kind of forced into it. I didn't even think that was going to be something that for the long run. I mean, I opened an LLC overnight in the state of New York. I didn't have a website. I didn't have business cards. I remember at the time calling a friend, an entrepreneur friend, and it's like, hey, I'm filling up the form. And they're asking me for the name of my company. And she's like, don't sweat it. Just put your last name and consulting and just, go with the flow. And I was like, you're right. So Angelle Consulting was born. And then I remember that I just reached out to my networker, and there's no shame in my game. I was like, hey, this is what happened. If you have any work, like my skill set, if I can assist in any way, just reach out. And by April 3rd, I remember recouping almost 75% of the income of that company. And then I was like, oh, maybe that's not an in between freelancing until I found something else. Maybe there's something like to explore a little more intentionally. And so then, yeah, I never looked back from those early days that were indeed not very well thought out.
That's crazy. I always love that like entrepreneurship story because some people like mine was very like I was in business for a year and a half and like had kept my day job and like you hear all these different and then you hear like I woke up one morning and I couldn't go into the corporate job one more day and I put my
Right.
notice in. It's kind of cool that like it was like like you were probably still getting those people calling you like how do you like the new job? You're like funny story, uh, not there anymore. Also, do you have any work for me?
That's right.
Um, how
I've
did
been to
you?
so many coffee meetings. I was hyper caffeinated for like 3 months.
You're like seriously any decaf. Is it better than if they were all happy hour meetings? What like at what point though do you so you started this and obviously you realize there's a monetary aspect, but like were there any moments of like those that earlier obviously like what do I call my company, but like how do you move from like this is an oh shit thing to I'm figuring it out to like shaking some of that imposter syndrome and like starting to actually realize like oh my god I'm building something.
Right. Well, it's interesting because the building something, I'm a strong believer that thing happens for a reason. And if I had not been forced into entrepreneurship and if I had to write a business plan, I would have written the wrong one. And because there was two sides of my career. There was the media relation PR component as spokesperson for the French Consulate General, but there was also that international affairs, international relations that was very integral to my career. And so, if I had written a business plan, it would probably have been international relations related. And what I think the advantage that I got in, just reaching out to my network of people who knew me and telling them like, hey, whatever you have, I can help with, is that I had the market dictate where the value was in my skill set. And it really became apparent early on that it was much more on the PR side that it was on the international relations side. I got a few clients on the international relation, even work for a big B Corp in Atlanta and help with international contract negotiation and things of the like. But it was very much 80-20. And so to answer your question of as I was building over time, because I didn't have a mission statement and all that at the beginning, when things emerge so drastically on the PR side, that's when I'm like, okay, I need to kind of leave legacy client behind to really fully commit to being a PR agency. And so that's when the vision emerged and really became not only let's do PR, but let's do PR for mission driven leaders. And today, when we look at our clientele, we have about 40 to 50% of our clients that are nonprofit, and the other half are typically B Corp, social enterprises, ESG centric organization, or leaders who see profit as a fuel for a higher purpose.
That's really, it's funny that you talk, because I don't know, like you get around some of these entrepreneurship classes or whatever, the way we teach it, and we teach nothing but like venture backable entrepreneurship in most schools. That's it. You're gonna seed round, Series A, Series B, Series C, exit, or you bootstrap a consultancy. But then the other part about being so iterative is really interesting. Of like, you almost weren't given the opportunity to overthink it. You
Right.
just
No,
like,
I mean, and there was quote unquote little fear because the worst had happened. And so and then my whole vision of entrepreneurship shifted because I consider myself very risk averse, which is not, a trait that you associate with entrepreneurship very often. But I actually beg to differ. Looking back at what happened as an employee, where all your eggs are in one basket and your employer, now I look at having my company and having a portfolio of client and thinking, no, this is much more stable because if I lose a few clients, I'm still afloat. So yeah, I think for me, understanding that it was actually a diversification strategy, it appealed to that need for safety that I have. So I mean, and I think it might be more risky if you get external funding, but when it's your own and you're bootstrapping the whole thing, then you feel much more in control. Like I was not afraid of disappointing, investors, or it was just, resting on my shoulder. And I like that freedom.
yes. Oh yeah. Oh, the freedom is, anybody knows. Like, you're like, even in those like the darkest moments, like 2025, I think there were plenty for a lot of us. And I had some friends that closed shop, but like there were moments where even I was like, wonder what's out there. You're on like LinkedIn, and you're like, but like the poll where you're like, you get 2 weeks of paid time off. You're like, hell no, never going back. We will figure out a way to make this work. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is, well, A, to nerd out on our early childhood entrepreneurship stories, but also like you work with a lot of purpose driven enterprises, whatever you said, at B Corp, social enterprises, ESG driven organizations, nonprofits, and they don't know how to like brag about themselves. And so you see like one of two schools of thought. You see the, well, we just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, but we don't really like to talk about it, which to me is a giant wrong answer. Or you see the like, we did a great thing and like we stood there with a jumbo check and then we wrote a blog all about us and the call to action was to buy our widgets. What are the common mistakes you see out there, and how do you work with companies to help them avoid them and honestly tell better stories where you like that spotlight shines away from you but shines back on you? So like, help
Right.
help them.
I
Help
work
our
very
listeners.
little with the second category, gratefully, because in the impact space, usually people come to me and they're like, okay, we've grown organically, we're making an impact, we want to maximize impact, and we recognize that to maximize impact, we have to increase our visibility to stakeholders that are beyond our sphere of influence, and to leverage media, speaking opportunities, awards to do that. But they have that reaction like, but I don't want to be the center of attention. And so, and I love working with people like that, because then they're really great at delivering great PR, in the sense that they bring value to the reader, listeners, and for our media contacts. It's very important that they're not there to sell a service or a product, or even if it's like a membership based organization. The mistake I see the most for nonprofit, for profit alike, is that people start thinking about PR through the lens of the message. And it's three steps forward. You can't really craft the message until you know, well, first, why are you doing PR in the first place, and being clear on the goal, or the goals plural, right? Is it to educate a certain stakeholders around greenwashing? Is it about increasing sales, or membership, and if so, among which group of stakeholders? Is it to increase visibility within the funding community? So really starting from the place of the goals, so that then you can do reverse engineering, right? Because from there, step two is, well, which audience or audiences are going to get me there? And then once you know your audience, then you can craft the message. Because even though what a nonprofit or for profit does is, is one thing, the way they're going to talk about what they do and the impact is going to be very different if they're talking to an end consumer, to their, if they want to impact vendors, or whichever stakeholder is. So the biggest mistake I said is just almost starting with the end of like, this is what I want to say. And I'm like, until you know who you're speaking to, you can craft a message. And until you know what your goal is, you don't know who you need to speak to. And so I see a lot of people come to me and say, hey, I want to do PR and I want to be in Time magazine. And it's like, great. But then you go into the goal and it's like, well, our buying persona or construction executive. And it's like, okay, well, maybe Time is not like your higher return on investment. Maybe Construction Executive Magazine will get you much closer to your end goal. So I think that, yeah, starting with the goal and then reverse engineering to the message is the right approach to PR.
That is really, really interesting. I mean, I think about even from the parallels to like, people, even if you're listening to this and you're just like, what is my personal brand on LinkedIn, or all of these of like, what is the goal we're trying to accomplish, and
Right.
reverse engineer from that, and leave some of the vanity metrics of like, yeah, Time Magazine is going to get you more likes and more impressions, but are they the right impressions?
Right. 100%.
When you're crafting narratives, you talked about this in a conversation we had before this, of like this blending of the head and the heart. What do you mean by that? Like the head and the heart coming together,
Right.
and like, how do you help your clients actually do that? Because I think I mean, a lot of this is an art, but that is definitely um, a difficult art form to master.
Well, I think that a lot of people, when they tell a story, they either go all in on the data, or all in into the building an emotional connection, and really, you know, um, creating, yeah, a visceral reaction to a story. And a really powerful story typically merge both, right? Because you need the data. We live in an era where accountability and, framing an issue is very important. So let's say you are in the opioid prevention space, bringing the numbers of, how many people are impacted by the opioid crisis, if it's a local publication in the state of Georgia, if it's national in the United States, if it's international globally. But then people, numbers give a somewhat framework, but it doesn't really speak to people. I see that a lot in impact reports for like nonprofit, where they say we were able to increase or decrease depending on what the metrics is, and help this population, and like, let's say, decrease poverty within a stakeholder group by 10%. Like, what would be the difference between that 10 and 15%? Like, it doesn't build that emotional. We need to basically see the people behind the number. So you have to have the data, but also tell the story. And so, in the crafting of those stories, we always build upon a case study, a personal experience, so that people can put themselves and see themselves or their family members or their community in the story, so that it builds that emotional connection. You want to create an emotion that leads to an action. And again, the goal can be, it can be, the CTA can have many aspects, but you frame the problem with stats typically, and then bring it home with the heart story, and then lead to a call to action. And that's another mistake I see all too often, is a lack of call to action at the end. I don't care what, if it's an op-ed, if it's a byline, if it's a blog, it's a LinkedIn post. What's the call to action? It created an emotion in someone's, a listener or reader. What do you want to channel through that emotion? And so, always ending a piece of communication with a clear call to action. Is it to visit a website, register to vote, buy Narcan for opioid prevention and save life, whatever that might be? There should always be a call to action.
And that, like, I made the joke earlier about too strong of a call to action, where it's like, buy our widgets. Like, there's a balance there too of like, that's where it's a visit our website. And if you're a nonprofit, it can be, if you'd like to support our mission, donate.
Absolutely.
It
And
is
it
buy our
also
widget,
can
but it's
be,
different when it's a nonprofit.
absolutely, it can also be, choose one friend to discuss, opioid prevention techniques. It doesn't have to be financial in nature, but there should always be, is it on the educational side, the sales side, but there should always be an action that leads to, a communication that leads to an action.
And when you talk about like the tug at the heart part of the story, like how do you balance that with something like opioids or something? Like, is there like an ethical like gray area of like, how do like, do you anonymize the story? Or because I imagine, like, I mean, I pick up track, like there's plenty, and I probably don't do a good job because I'm always like, oh, my buddy Tony or this guy, but like there's still generic stories. You'd have to really know Athens to know who I'm talking about. But like, how do you like
Right.
navigate that gray area?
That's a good question, and it depends, and it brings the topic of consent in storytelling, which I think nonprofit are slowly understanding. Is that I think there was an era where, if a nonprofit served a specific population, they would, portray that population as in need of service. They were not really empowered in the service. They were not voices in the story. They were portrayed, and typically in a vulnerable way, to create the heart. I think that you can build a heart, but you cannot do so without consent. And consent in storytelling is not only asking, hey, can we use your story to illustrate the work that we're doing in the community? And obviously getting a yes. If it's a no, yeah, anonymizing a story is very much possible. But not only that, if they say yes, understanding that that consent is not eternal, because you may have someone who is in need of recovery right now, but in a year from now, they might be in full, have re-entered the workforce and being in a very different place in life, and they don't want to be dragged back by that old story that is no longer accurate. And it's a great opportunity for the nonprofit too, because it makes the story richer, right? So I think that obtaining a yes, portraying people from a place of empowerment and not victimhood, and then understanding that that consent needs to be reassessed periodically.
Very interesting. I mean, again, though, if you're a nonprofit or a purpose-driven, you want to make sure that you're, I don't know, there's always that element of making sure you're doing the right thing. And when in doubt, are we on the right side of, even if it's legal, of doing the right thing? Because it's the reputational damage is so much more severe, I think, when we get caught in on the wrong side of the gray area when we claim to be purpose-driven or mission-driven or social enterprise. So, Claire, we talked earlier about Angelle Consulting and how inspirational that name was as you came up with it in the middle of the night as you filled out an LLC registration form. But you've rebranded. We've kind of got this like big pivot into 2026. I was there in December of 25 when you did your rebrand. So tell our listeners about the rebrand and kind of I don't know, the crystallization of focus as we enter this new year and this new chapter for what is no longer Angelle Consulting.
That's right. No, and it was a long overdue. Again, very chaotic beginnings without clear vision, and then but the ethos of what now is Elevia emerged fairly early on in the process. I would say within 18 months, and really we do one thing: PR through three tools: media, speaking, and awards opportunity, and we serve mission driven leaders, either nonprofit or for profit. But that was not reflected in that name. That was, again, yes, a spur of the moment, Form 592 in the state of New York. And so I had wanted to do a rebrand for a long time. But, as you know, when you're an entrepreneur, you're at least for me, still very much in the trenches. And so it took longer than I expected, but we finally made it a priority last year. And it felt really good to end the year with the announcement that Angel Consulting was transitioning to Elevia, which is a play on word between elevate and alleviate. And the reason is because we elevate the name of business leaders and nonprofit leaders who alleviate some of the world's biggest challenges. And so we had a small gathering at Beyond Edgewood in December and made that announcement. And it really feels like we're really stepping into that era of intentionality that is now truly reflected in everything that we do and how we're portrayed into the world.
Very humble, by the way, to say it was a small gathering. That was a very powerful room. I enjoyed. Where sometimes you sit around in rooms you're in, you're like, "How did I end up in this room? Look who's here." It was a very well done event. So don't be too humble on it. But hey, that's why. And well, that too, and a lot of those people were clients and friends and stuff. Where it was like, okay,
That was the whole event was very much a reflection of that intentionality, and every guest, including yourself, were really handpicked. And I never had a moment like this in my life where in one room, I know everyone because it's my event, and I curated the guest list, but really the people who showed up were people who were there to be supporter cheerleaders, and like being in the room where that every single person is just hoping for the best for you. It was just very powerful and very humbling.
yeah, those are those like imposter syndrome moments where it's impossible not to at
Yes.
least shed a little bit because it like I even made the joke like, why am I in this room? But like we never shed it completely. But yeah, when you look out in that room and you're like, no, everybody's here because they want Claire to win. Like they want Claire to be successful, and we're all here to like basically like, well, no, I have to go support her today. I drove in from Athens. You have that moment of like, oh, maybe people do like me.
And it was funny because I do PR for other people. I don't do my own thought leadership. I don't like to be in the spotlight. And my friend, actress Kat Graham, who had agreed to moderate the event, we had a prep call the Thursday before, and I sent her the run of show. And she's like, well, where are you in your own event? I was like, oh, I'm just going to give like a 3-minute welcoming remark, and then we'll move to the panel with, those incredible thought leader. And there were, I had Rodney Buller, Deborah Lamb, Crystal Henmanson, really all-star panel. And she looks at me, we're on Zoom, and she's like, I'm coming for you. If you're not inserting yourself in the program, I'm not coming anymore. And I think we all need friends like that who just, give you a good kick in the butt when you need it. And so we ended up having a fireside chat about the company, and she's been our longest client in addition to be a longtime friend. And so I appreciated the opportunity to tell my own story, even though that was not my natural inclination to do that.
Sometimes even the pros, though, we joked earlier about like that either don't talk about it at all or talk about it way too much. And it's like sometimes you need the friend to be like, you can talk about it a little bit more. You're safe, you're humble, everybody likes you. Like, tell the story.
And I was trying to lean on the wall. If I could have disappeared, I probably would have done it. But uh, But I tell that to our client every day because I work with people just like me who understand the importance of the impact and are reluctant spokesperson for it. But I can't. I have to walk my own talk.
And it's hard though when you do that impact work. Like again, coming back to that modesty, I jokingly was like, "That's wrong," but at the end of the day, like this weird, like two-step dance thing that we're doing with social impact organizations, where like we're trying to do the right thing, but like the more successful we are, like B Corp community hates to talk about money, and it's like y'all, like the best advocacy you can do is building a financially sustainable business.
Right.
And like that does take like talking about the impact you're making and getting people to like you because you do the good, and then also getting them to spend money with you. So like it's this weird, it's a very uncomfortable place, I think, for a lot of us. So I don't think you're alone. I don't think the
No, I'm a
companies you
very
work
good
with are
company,
alone.
and I'm
Yeah,
working
and
on it.
but again, the more successful you are, like like anyway, everybody's heard me get on this soapbox before. So, well, Claire, I know we can keep this conversation going all day, but unfortunately, we have to wrap it up at some point. So, can you let people know how to follow you, how to follow Elevia, anything else that we didn't ask that you want us to ask?
Sure. No, I think you covered, the big picture, and our website is elevia.agency, and I'm on LinkedIn primarily and a smidge of Instagram. So if you look for Claire Angelle, you'll find me.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming by. Thank you for, to quote the Golden Girls, thank you for being a friend.
Thank you.
Excited that all we're going to do in 2026 too.
That's right.
Some creative collaborations and work together. So just excited for you, for the agency, and for everything in the year ahead.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Claire.
Well, that wraps up another edition of Be the Change Georgia. We're grateful, as always, for the opportunity to serve you with this content and grow this incredible community of purpose-driven B Corp leaders. If you haven't already, we would be grateful for you to rate the show wherever you get your podcast by simply tapping the number of stars you think it deserves and sharing it with a friend. This helps us get the word out and continue to use our collective influence as a force for good. This podcast wouldn't be possible without the help from our production team at Chat with Leaders Media. Learn how you can launch your own podcast to grow your business at chatwithleaders.com. Thanks again for listening, and now go be a leader worth following.